Have you ever wondered what the difference is between Hebraic roots and Jewish roots? Or who are the Jewish people anyway, and why does the Bible speak about them? Today on Back to Our Roots, we'll be discussing these things and many more. Stay tuned.
Shalom. I'm so happy you could join us today. This is Back to Our Roots. I'm Alex Schussler, and this is my co-host,
Rachel Hyman.
So glad to have you with us, Rachel. Today, we're going to be talking about back to the roots. What does that mean? We're going to be talking about who are the Jewish people, what are the Jewish roots versus the Hebraic roots today. We also have a very, very special guest, and I'm really excited. A little bit later, we're going to bring him out. He is our resident theologian. He's going to really bring some great stuff. You know, speaking about back to the roots, there's been so much, Rachel, that you see within Christianity today, this whole movement about the roots and this and that, you know, and I think that there's a lot of people have confusion about the difference between when we say the Hebraic roots versus the Jewish roots.
And a lot of people don't even know that the roots of Christianity is Jewish.
Which is maybe the craziest thing. But when we talk about Hebraic roots versus Jewish roots, we want you as our friends and our audience, those following us, to grow to an understanding. When we speak Hebraic roots, we're talking about the culture, the atmosphere, the way things were at the time that Jesus walked the earth, but even going back before that.
That's right.
And when we speak of the Jewish roots, we're talking about contemporary Judaism. And you know, there is a real connection, but we don't want people to get confused between those two things. So, Rachel, I know that you have a background in Judaism, as I do. What was your first exposure? When you became a Christian, how did you reconcile being Jewish, being Christian? Where were you?
You know, that's such a good question. It was really confusing for me because I always saw Christians as blaming us for the death of Jesus. So I always saw Christianity as kind of our enemy. But I met so many Christians who were very nice at the same time. I was a little confused with the whole Santa Claus and Easter Bunny thing, but eventually when I really found out what Bible Christianity was all about, that helped clear things up for me.
Right. You know, when we try to understand the difference between even biblical Judaism, maybe we could use that term, or Hebraic roots, you know, we're wanting to somehow get back to that place where Jesus was when he walked the face of the earth. We have a special guest with us today, and he's a great friend to both of us.
Awesome.
I'd like to bring out our resident theologian, Alexander Bolitnikov. We call him Sasha. Sasha, come on out. Sasha's a very gifted man. He is a teacher. He's an evangelist. He is completing his PhD in an area of Hebraic studies. I've had the opportunity to travel with Sasha to Germany on a couple occasions. We've worked together quite a bit in the Jewish ministry within the Adventist Church. Sasha, it's wonderful to have you with us.
It's a pleasure for me to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were able to join us. And Sasha's going to be with us throughout all of the programs, just to add the special touch that he's able to bring. Sasha, today we're talking about the Hebraic roots, and in specific, the difference between the Hebraic roots and the Jewish roots. And we want to get into just a little bit about who the Jews are today, and maybe even just a little bit of history. And I know that, Sasha, you have some great things in the area of the origin of the term Jew, the history of that, and versus Hebrew, versus the Israelis or whatever. Why don't you give us some of that, Sasha?
If we go to the Bible, to the book of Genesis, the first time the word Hebrew appears in the book of Genesis chapter 13, and Abraham, actually Abram, is called the Hebrew. And it is interesting that Hebrew is not referred as an ethnicity of Abraham, because if we look at Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 5, it speaks specifically that Abraham was wandering Aramean. So his ethnicity was Aramaic. Yeah, Aramaic.
Right.
Arameans were the people who lived throughout the Middle East, through Mesopotamia, the Iraq today, between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. But it is interesting how we look at the history of Abraham, and we realize his father Terach left Ur of Chaldean, which is down below where, down at the Persian Gulf almost, and he was ordered to go into the land of Canaan.
Yes.
And he went up to the borders, which is today Syria, in the city of Haran, and he stopped there. Right. And so God calls Abraham to keep going. And so Abraham, in order to end up in the land of Canaan, he had to cross Euphrates River. In Hebrew, which is the language, right? The word Hebrew itself comes from the root avar, means to cross over.
Yes.
So Abram is called a man from over there, from across the river. That was his nickname.
Right.
And after this nickname, all the children of Abraham, including Ishmael, including all his children from Keturah, after Sarah died, they can be called Hebrews,
So it really, I've heard several occasions people referring to Abraham as the first Jew, but that's not really correct then by what you're saying, right?
No, this is not correct. This is not exact. What we have is Isaac, the Hebrew, the son of Abraham, together with his brother Ishmael. And of course, Isaac has Jacob and Esau. And we know Esau is the father of the Edomite nation. They lived down toward the Red Sea. And then we have Jacob, who after his trials and tribulation is called Israel, the one who wrestles with God. And he has 12 sons.
Right.
And that's the nation of Israel.
And that's through those 12 tribes, of course, we get Judah, which is where that name Jew comes from.
Yes, the name Judah comes, and the reason why today there is no Hebrews, because basically what happens through the history, Israel is split into two different countries, north and south, and 10 northern tribes apostatize from God, and they are taken into captivity and they disappear through assimilation. And so the only tribe which the book 2 Kings chapter 17 talks, the only tribe which is left is the tribe of Judah.
Right. So the Jews. So let's jump way forward in time now. Because we do want to be able to talk about the difference between what we're saying, the Hebraic roots versus the Jewish roots. And let's just take a little bit of time and talk about who the Jews are today. It's interesting. All of us were raised within different contexts, but raised as Jews, and then accepted Jesus, or Yeshua, his Hebrew name, as Messiah. And our experiences are different. But now the Jews that exist today, I don't think a lot of people understand it. Just like there's many different denominations within Christianity, there is different denominational differences within Judaism, right?
Oh yeah, it can go from extreme right, like Lubavitch, Hasidic.
Which is the ultra-Orthodox, we would know. Those are the guys that most people would think, in New York, the Orthodox
the big
Jews
black hats,
with the hats, or with the fox fur type of hats, right?
Yeah,
and the coats,
and the curly hair underneath.
Just to make clear,
they try to model actually, and that's what's important for people to understand, that their lifestyles, the garb of these people, their laws are based on the 18th century law codes and writings, and it's very far from.
Right, and they're stuck.
Rabbinic law instead of biblical law.
It's not even rabbinic. It's way, way post-rabbinic. It's, I would say, medieval interpretation of rabbinic law.
Interesting. So we have the Orthodox and many sections within Orthodox Judaism.
The Orthodox.
There's many.
Yeah, the Orthodox Judaism, I would say, is the form of Judaism that actually sprung out of what is known in the New Testament as the Pharisaic teaching.
Right.
That's a traditional, conventional Pharisaic teaching that developed through the ages.
And we want people also to understand that, throughout these programs, when we talk about Pharisees, we're not talking in a negative sense, right? The Pharisees were a group of the ultra-Orthodox, as they are today, within the Jewish faith as a whole. Now also, not only do we have the Orthodox, but there is conservative, which is one step removed, which is what my background was. My family was conservative Judaism.
Yeah, the conservative and actually reform is the late development, as Judaism, basically the traditional Orthodox Judaism, split in the middle, left and right. The left went basically saying, okay, we want to integrate into a current society, because for many generations among the Christian especially in the Christian countries, medieval time, Jews were forced to live in special areas called ghettos. And basically, Reform and Conservative, they say, okay, let us get out of this situation. Let us live normal life. It happened with the development of democracy in Europe, beginning of 19th century. While the Hasidic, they went the other way, and they said, let's preserve the values which we developed during this medieval life of separate from the rest of the world.
Right. So which category today would you say most Jews are in?
The majority of the Jews today are secular, and in America, 60% of American Jews relate themselves as either Reform or Conservative or other names that exist for liberal, progressive Judaism.
Now that brings to a really interesting thing, is that unlike arguably maybe any other religion, Judaism is not just a religion. Judaism is an ethnicity as well. Now, Sasha mentioned this term, secular Jews. And what we're talking about here is Jews that see themselves ethnically as a Jewish person. If you went up and asked them what they were, they would say, I'm Jewish. Yet, they're not practicing any of the religious practices.
They might not even believe in God.
And that's a very typical thing.
That's how I grew up. My grandparents were raised Orthodox, but then became communist. And so my parents were raised communist, atheist, and we even didn't know of our religion. I didn't know anything about my religion. My father even didn't know until the last years of his life who Abraham was, because we were so ignorant. But as all Jews in Europe, we were very well aware that we're not Russians, not Ukrainians, but Jews, because that's who we ethnically were considered.
Right, interesting. And I know that in my upbringing, I had a similar thing. Now, our family did practice what we call the high holidays, things like Passover and Yom Kippur, and we do have a very special program that we'll be discussing those particular things, so I'm really looking forward to that. That'll give you a deeper reason to hang with us, because that will be coming. The Jews in America have become a real melting pot of all the different forms of Judaism. And you know, I don't know how many people know this, but there's a total of about 13 million Jews worldwide. Now, when you think about the total population of the world, and close to half of that is in Israel, and the other half is in North America, and we have this little small percentage that's mixed around the rest of the world. You know, where I live down in South Florida versus New York, those are probably the two largest population centers of Jews in North America.
We have to mention that there are over 5 million Jews in America,
right.
And these are only those who are registered with Jewish organizations. And there are mixed families that are like my family, which is mixed, and we're not registered. So we would have to say, estimate maybe around 7-8 million Jews in the U.S. and Canada.
Right, right. So let's shift gears just a little bit, and I want to get back to talking about the difference when we use the terms Hebraic roots versus the Jewish roots. It's going to be important for our friends, for those following this program, to understand that, because we are going to be focusing so much on the Hebraic roots. So Sasha, when I say to you something like, no, we're talking about the Hebraic roots versus the Jewish roots, or in fact, let me go to Rachel first. From her perspective, how do you receive something like that? If I say, no, this is Hebraic roots versus Jewish roots, what would you think?
The first thing that comes to my mind would be biblical versus traditional, possibly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think the other thing, I mean, for me, is when we talk Hebraic roots, my mind goes back maybe even to the 1st century, at least in the context that I see it. And when I say 1st century, I'm talking about the time when Jesus was walking on the face of the earth. What was the Jewish religion like? So, and it's so very different now, right, Sasha, from what it was.
Well, if we talk about Hebraic roots, first of all, we have to really come to the existence of two contrasting mentalities in that time. Greek mentality, which comes from Greek philosophers, you know, Plato, Aristotle, and other, and the Semitic Hebrew mentality. And these two mentalities, they look upon things totally different.
Right. So it's kind of like, from a Greek perspective, you have to be able to analyze and break everything down, right? It has to add up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they all have to add, right?
Well, I usually give an example. How do you portray the bicycle? And people will say to me, oh, the bicycle has a handlebar and a frame and 2 wheels. And I say, this is typical Greek, because you start with the components.
Right.
Hebrew starts with actions.
Right.
And in Hebrew mentality, a bicycle is a nice machine that allows you to speed up your motion. Right. And so if you look at the picture of God, we'll be talking about this in our next shows, but in the picture of God, we don't have actually a pictographic representation of God, but we have a great description of God, merciful, almighty, powerful, you know, describes the character, the actions of God. Right. And that's the Hebrew, that's what the Hebraic, that's the origin of Hebraic mentality.
So when we're talking, especially about the Hebraic roots now, we don't want people to get confused that, oh, this is just talking about Jewish stuff.
Right.
Because the truth of it is that when we go back to that 1st century period, when we look at the time when Jesus, or Yeshua, which is, you know, I use the name Yeshua quite a bit, and someone asked me, why do you use Yeshua? So, well, that's because that's what his mama called him. so if
Back to the
she
roots.
called him Yeshua, we can call him Yeshua.
That's right.
But Jesus, Yeshua, he's our Messiah.
Same thing.
It doesn't matter. But in that time period, when we strive to really understand who he is, you know, this is very much like when you get married. In the beginning, you know your husband or your wife, you know, this much. You know enough to say, yeah, I'm going to make a commitment to this person. But the truth is, should you be married, God willing, for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you spend a lifetime of getting to know them, and not really what history has portrayed them to be, but really who they are, who they were, what made them the person that they are. So for me, understanding the Hebraic roots is very much like that. You know,
awesome.
Someone asked me the question, can a person come to a saving knowledge of Messiah without really delving into the Hebraic roots?
Of course.
Right, of course, that's the answer. But it's kind of like that analogy of the marriage, you know, that yes, you can come to know Jesus or Yeshua, and he can be revealed to you, but when we desire to dig deeper, when we desire to know the fullness of who he is,
We have a deeper relationship.
that's where we want to really strive to understand what we're calling the Hebraic roots of the faith. We want to take a look at the cultural aspect of that first century period. We want to know about how Yeshua saw the world around him, but remembering that he saw the world through Hebraic or Jewish eyes.
The biggest problem in Christianity is when, because historically there was a hatred toward the Jews, Christianity of the end of the 2nd century went strongly against the its Hebraic roots, and it was replaced with Greek philosophy, which was very easy to accept based on the New Testament Greek. And so many terms and many statements in the New Testament viewed through the eyes of the Greek philosophical thinking ended up distorting the image of Jesus, who he really is.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So as we move on from program to program, we're going to be delving into some really important aspects, like we said at the intro. We're going to be looking at things like, is the New Testament a Christian book? Is it a Jewish book?
And are the Jewish festivals really Jewish?
That's a really good one, and I know that we're going to have a lot of interest when we hit that one. And talking about Jesus, who is he? Not just what history has made him out to be, but who Jesus is in the context.
What did he grow up?
What was his life? And you know, here's one of the things that prior to coming to know him, it may be crazy for some people to hear this, but I didn't even know that Jesus was a Jew. And you know, imagine my shock as a Jew to find out that who I thought was the Christians' God was the Jewish Messiah. So I am so excited about the topics that we have in front of us, and I hope that you're as excited. You know, there's a whole nother aspect to this program as well. Both Rachel and I have got the bitten by the music bug at different times in our life, and we're going to be sharing our musical experiences, and we're going to be sharing with you some really unique music. So today I get the opportunity of bringing the first song.
And I think this is Sim Shalom. You wrote it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. So I'm going to slide over here and get ready.
All right, go for it. And while Alex is setting up, he didn't mention it, but he's also a pastor of a large church in South Florida. And Sasha knows this song really, really well. And so I think I'll let you tell us a little bit about this song.
This is a liturgical poem, a prayer, which means establish peace. Sim Shalom, establish peace, goodness, and mercy upon everyone and upon all your people.
Nice. So it's a prayer song.
Sim Shalom Tova Uvrecha Ken v'chesed v'rachamim Sim Shalom Tova Uvrecha Ken v'chesed v'rachamim Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael Amecha Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael Amecha v'al kol Yisrael. Sim Shalom Tova Uvrecha Ken v'chesed v'rachamim חמים. שים שלום טובה וברכה, כן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך, ועל כל ישראל ברכנו אבינו כולם כאחד באור פניך. Oh, bless us, oh, our Father, all of us as one by the light of your face. Grant peace and goodness and blessing, grace and kindness, compassion. Grant peace and goodness and blessing, grace and kindness, compassion upon us and all Israel, your people, upon us and all Israel, upon us and all Israel, your people, upon us and all Israel. Amen. Well, Rachel, it's been a great first show.
It has.
And we want to close with a blessing. May the Lord bless you and may he keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and bring you his peace. Amen. We hope to see you again. Join us once again on Back to Our Roots. Amen.